Hey guys, today's video I'll be doing a discussion talking about Tropical Storm Fred, which has just been named earlier this morning by the National Hurricane Center, and as well talk a little bit about Invest 95L, which is a new disturbance that the NHC has been monitoring lately, that is out in the MDR, just a bit to the south and west of the Cabo Verde Islands, which has a medium chance of development within the next 5 days. First, before we dive in and talk about the tropics, I do want to say thank you to everyone who viewed my song that I posted on YouTube just a couple days ago. It has now nearly 100 views on YouTube, which is fantastic. I'm so happy about it. Thank you to everyone who watched it and enjoyed it. I'm so glad about how much positive feedback there was. So thank you so much, and let's get started. All right, so first let's talk about Invest 95L quickly. Currently, it's a tropical wave located over the eastern tropical Atlantic, several hundred miles west-southwest of the Cabo Verde Islands, and continues to produce disorganized showers and thunderstorms. Some gradual development of this system is possible, and a tropical depression could form by early next week while moving generally westward across the tropical Atlantic and it's moving around 20 miles per hour. The system could reach portions of the Leeward Islands by late Saturday. So within the next 2 days, it has a 20% chance of development, so really a pretty low chance of development. Within the next 5 days, it has a slightly higher chance of development at a medium 40% chance. So let's look at the 5-day graphical tropical weather outlook for it, and you can see it has a huge area of development from where it is now, and it stretches all the way towards Puerto Rico, the Leeward Islands, the Virgin Islands, and all the way almost to Hispaniola and Dominican Republic. So this system has a long time to try and develop, and it looks like it will likely form more towards next week or maybe towards the very end of this upcoming weekend. We'll see how it progresses and what happens with it. Now, let's talk about Tropical Storm Fred, and that'll be the main focus of today's video, of course. Fred was just named earlier this morning. It has sustained winds of 40 miles per hour. Its pressure is at 1,006 millibars, and it is moving to the west-northwest at 16 miles per hour, so it's moving at a decent clip. Now, let's look at the cone forecast from the National Hurricane Center, and you can see it's forecast it's right offshore of the Dominican Republic, and it looks like it will make landfall there and go over particularly the Haiti and just the whole island pretty much by later today. It'll weaken because of the mountain interaction to a tropical depression, but then it looks like it will go back over water pretty quickly by overnight tonight into early Thursday, and reemerge over the waters and potentially strengthen back to a tropical storm by around 2 p.m. Thursday. And then it looks to continue to be just offshore Cuba, but stay over water, and then go into the Gulf and impact Florida and maybe even the Gulf Coast. So we'll have to continue to watch this a lot going through the rest of this week and into next week. So this will be a continuous videos being put out from me on the system through the rest of this week and into early next into next week, whenever it ends up potentially making landfall in Florida or wherever it does in the Gulf on the Gulf Coast. Of course, let's look at wind speed probabilities. You can see the tropical storm force wind speed probabilities. They're not too high, but I mean, of course, the Dominican Republic and portions of Puerto Rico, they could see gusty winds, maybe up to around tropical storm force winds, most likely in gusts. I don't know about sustained winds, since it's already a pretty weak tropical storm, barely a tropical storm. It's like 40 miles per hour, which is barely the threshold for a tropical storm, so it'll be a tropical depression, so it might, especially in gusts, be a tropical storm force. But, as it gets back over the water past the Dominican Republic, it may re-strengthen into a tropical storm, and the chances of tropical storm force winds for areas like Cuba, Florida, the Bahamas, those chances for tropical storm force sustained winds might go up a good bit. We'll have to see. And then, of course, the arrival time of tropical storm force winds. The Dominican Republic's already feeling it pretty much. And then as it emerges back over water past the Dominican Republic, Cuba will be felt towards Thursday into Friday, and then Florida later Friday into Saturday, it looks like as of right now. Now let's go to tropical tidbits and look at the satellite imagery first for Invest 95L, which is over the open waters of the Atlantic and the MDR, the main development region. You can see that it does have some spin to it and some convection blowing up around it. It's still definitely very disorganized, and we'll have to keep an eye on it over the rest of this week and into this weekend to see how much better it gets organized, or if it doesn't get organized anymore at all over the next few days and into this weekend into early next week. Now let's look at Tropical Storm Fred. You can see it has much better defined convection blowups around the center, and you can see parts of this bigger blowup has weakened, but more convection is continuing to blow up. It looks like it's kind of starting to get more ragged because of that beginning, it seems, of that interaction with Hispaniola and the mountains of Hispaniola, and we'll continue to see that as it gets closer to landfall and goes over the island. We'll see what happens to it. We'll see if it maybe it does fully fall apart, or if it's able to survive and continue its trek across the rest of the Atlantic towards the U.S. and impact Cuba and whatnot. Moving into tomorrow and beyond. Now let's look at the forecast models. We'll look at the GFS model first. Let's zoom into the Western Atlantic. You can see here's Fred right over here. The GFS shows it pretty weak, of course, because it is very weak. And we move it forward in time. The GFS starts to show its low-level center starting to reform by Saturday as it's kind of north of the Cuba coast. And then it goes through the Straits of Florida, goes over southern Florida, the Keys, and over into the Gulf, and kind of really parallels. It's just offshore the west coast of Florida, and kind of tries to re-strengthen a bit before it goes over the Panhandle of Florida, Gulf Coast, and brings tons of rain and maybe some wind to the southeast in Florida, and moves offshore of the southeast, and then tries to re-strengthen again off the east coast, and then move up and away from the U.S. and out, all the way out in the open Atlantic there. Now we'll have to see if it does last that long. We'll have to see that it's very far out, so who knows. But the important thing is that we have to continue to monitor the system and see what kind of impacts at first it will bring to the U.S., where it will impact. Of course, it looks most likely that Florida will be the first state in the U.S. to be impacted by Fred, but we'll see what other states may be impacted, whether it's like Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and then maybe even Georgia, Tennessee, South Carolina, the Carolinas. We'll just have to see as we get towards the end of this work week and into the weekend. It will be very, very interesting to see what will happen. Now let's look at the Canadian model, the CMC model. And you can see there's Fred over here, a very, very weak system currently. It goes over Hispaniola, falls apart pretty quickly. CMC shows it's starting to try and reform kind of around the same time the GFS shows, or on Saturday. But it shows it is a much weaker system and much closer and likely more over Florida than what the GFS is showing, but still bringing some rain and maybe some wind to Florida and the rest of the southeast eventually. And then it shows it just staying over the U.S., over the east coast, and going farther north into the mid-Atlantic and even northeast towards the early part of next week and towards maybe the middle of next week. So again, the Canadian model, the GFS model, both kind of agree that it'll stay kind of weak, maybe strengthen a bit if it survives Hispaniola, and then beyond that, once it makes landfall in the U.S., what will happen, we'll see. That's a much bigger question mark, and that answer won't really be known until we get towards this weekend into early next week. Now, the European model is what the European model is showing, goes over Hispaniola, still keeps that kind of circulation, that vorticity, pretty well past Hispaniola, and then it starts to kind of re-strengthen as it approaches Florida. It really starts to kind of get a better vorticity signature as it starts to head towards the Panhandle of Florida, the Big Bend of Florida. It heads over Florida into the southeast and starts to fall apart, and then reemerges back over the Atlantic, offshore of the mid-Atlantic coast, and still has some amount of decent vorticity to it. So that is very, very interesting, and we'll have to see what happens with it. Now, let's go to the Wikipedia page for the 2021 Atlantic hurricane season. We have now had 6 named storms, 6 depressions, 1 hurricane. That 1 hurricane was Elsa. So far this hurricane season, 19 total fatalities have occurred. The total damage is at now above $390 million in damage. You can see the forecasts, the newer forecasts, are still calling for the 2021 Atlantic hurricane season to be pretty active and potentially get towards the end of the conventional naming list, which is very interesting, especially since last year just was so active and went way past the end of the conventional naming list with 9 named Greek alphabet storms, and now the Greek alphabet is no longer in use. So God knows if we'll get to the end of the conventional naming list, and if we need the newer and just new approved by the World Meteorological Organization, the new auxiliary naming list that has a whole new set of 21 names that are going to be able to be retired if any of those are used. So we'll have to see what happens with that. But of course, I really doubt that we'll get that active again this season compared to last season, especially. So, we'll just have to see. Of course, again, we've had 6 named storms. Elsa formed all the way back in early July, around a little more than a month ago. So, we've gone about a month without any tropical activity in the Atlantic. Fred has now formed, so now we're starting to get more back into the tropics and see what will happen with how active the tropics get now, as we are now starting to get within the peak of the hurricane season, since it's now August. And of course, September is the true peak month of the hurricane season. September 10th, which is now just a little less than a month away, is the peak day of the Atlantic hurricane season. So that is the most likely time frame and likely time frame to see tropical activity occur in the Atlantic. So again, as we approach, especially that time frame, we'll see how much more active the Atlantic gets and see how many more names we can get crossed off of the list. So far, we've only had 6 names. We've only gotten through Fred, the F name. And then Grace is next. This list was also used in the 1991 Atlantic hurricane season, which is notorious for having, of course, the perfect storm, and then as well Hurricane Bob that also impacted New England along with the perfect storm. So, of course, I definitely think we'll get way past the amount of names that were used in 1991's Atlantic hurricane season, which was only like 6 or 7. So again, this season still looks to be quite active. We'll see how active it gets. Definitely will be way less active than last season. But again, we'll still hold likely a very decent amount of tropical of named storms, hurricanes, and even a good amount of major hurricanes likely. We haven't gotten any major hurricanes yet. We'll see what happens with when we'll get our first major hurricane. We're approaching that time to see our first major hurricane occur. Of course, last year we saw our first major hurricane occur within the month of August, Laura, towards the mid to the end of August. So, again, we'll have to see when we'll get our first major hurricane this year. Of course, Elsa became the earliest forming 5th named storm, beating last year's tropical storm Edward, which was very interesting by a record of 5 days. By 5 days, so that's quite interesting. Of course, 2021 Atlantic hurricane season still holds some records still, even though it's way less active than how the naming of last year's storms occurred and whatnot, and what happened with last year. So, again, this was an update for Tropical Storm Fred and Invest 95L. Tropical Storm Fred will continue to monitor, see what happens with it, especially over the next day, with what happens with its interaction with the Dominican Republic, and then if it does survive, we'll see what happens with it afterwards, see how much it impacts Cuba, maybe the Bahamas, and then of course the U.S. eventually as we get towards this weekend and into early next week. And then of course Invest 95L, we'll see what happens with that. Of course, God knows how well it will form and get more organized. Of course, it may not organize much, and it might not become anything, and a named storm, even a depression. So again, we'll have to continue to monitor both over the rest of this week and into this weekend and into next week. So hopefully you guys really enjoyed this video. Again, if you like this video, please consider liking the video down below. Comment down below what you guys think will happen with Fred and even Invest 95L. If you have any thoughts about Invest 95L and what will happen with that. As well, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. If you like this kind of content, please consider subscribing down below. Let's have a lively yet respectful discussion down there in the comments section about what we think will happen with both Fred and Invest 95L. So again, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Please consider subscribing down below if you haven't already. Like the video, and again, subscribe if you haven't already. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!